Ooga Booga. Today we're talking about Berachain, specifically going in depth into the ecosystem, talking about the native DEX aggregator. Yes, it's actually called Ooga Booga. So without further ado, let's jump straight into it. My name is Waj, and these are the deep dives that we like to do. We're going to cover a lot on the video today, I should say, talking a little bit about Berachain and DEXes and kind of where aggregators fit into that. We'll go through the different features that Ooga Booga have, as well as the revenue model. We always like to talk about the bull and bear case and investment thesis in these videos. Of course, nothing is financial advice. I'm just a random guy on the internet. What do I know? And so without further ado, let's jump in. Now, we're going to first of all start off with a little bit of background, just to really make sure that you guys understand why a product like this even needs to exist. Now, when we see new ecosystems pop up, and when I say new ecosystems, I'm really referring to layer 1 chains. We saw this a lot last cycle with, Sol, Luna, AVAX. This cycle probably a little bit more with the rise of the L2s and the L1s, the Move L1s that we have today. What we see is every single time one of these new ecosystems pop up, we have tons of decentralized exchanges pop up with that. This is just something that we see time and time again, and likely will happen again when we have Berachain, when we have Monad, Hyperliquid, some of the other L2s and L1s that we're going to see as well. Now, whilst this itself is not inherently a bad thing, but what is a bad thing is that when we see all of these DEXes pop up, we often have a lot of fragmentation of liquidity. We see the same pools listed again and again and again on all of these different network layers, but also DEXes as well. Stuff like, a Bitcoin stable pair or an ETH stable pair, or like the native gas token or governance token and a stable pair. Again and again and again, we see this just repeated, and this liquidity gets fragmented. It's not very good, and just leads to poor UX and more slippage, of course. What happens is on one exchange, you can get a better kind of order route, and another one, you can get a worse one. It's just not very good. And so it takes us into this place where we often need aggregators to kind of help with this. Now, this is an aggregator that I've got on screen right now, actually. This is DeFi Llama Swap, I should say. Somewhere that I actually use a lot, and that's because it's an aggregator of aggregators. And you can see that even despite the fact that we're using aggregators of aggregators, there is still some difference in prices across different exchanges. And this is ETH mainnet, arguably probably one of the most liquid places that exists in the market today. And so you can imagine when you're on kind of more long tail L1s or L2s, the effect of this is drastically increased, I should say. And so I think aggregators really do have a role, especially on newer chains, I should say. And we can look directly on Berachain and have a look and see kind of what are the DEXes that we're going to see. Now, BEX is obviously the native exchange on Berachain itself, built by the foundation. But we do have some of these other ones that are kind of doing really, really well. Kodiak, Honeypot, just a couple of examples there. As well as many others. It was really interesting. I did actually host a Twitter space not too long ago, kind of going over the Berachain DEX wars, and it's interesting to see like the different features that some of these DEXes have. Yes, they are in some ways competing with one another, but in other ways they have different product offerings and things like that. But ultimately, as a user, the likelihood is that there will be some sort of bera honey pool on pretty much all of these. And so that is going to lead to fragmentation, and we will need an aggregator of some sort if you want to optimize to reduce slippage and really make the UX better. And so that's pretty much what we have here. And here's an example, right? I was just playing around on testnet one day. I had some honey, wanted to swap it into IBGT. I went on one DEX, was getting 7.87 IBGT. Another one was getting 4.72. Now, I think 4.72 is more like what the actual price was. But so this is a very much exaggerated example, but the idea is here, look, on different exchanges, you can get different prices. On some places, you'll have better pricing. What if you could just kind of search through all of the different DEXes that are available so that you always get the best price? You don't have to worry about which DEX you need to go to. That is pretty much the idea. And this is how you fix it. You fix it with something like Ooga Booga, which can route your trades. So if you're doing a swap from YEET into ETH, you can go through Kodiak V2 and V3 and Honeypot and BEX and kind of give yourself the best possible outcome. This is what the UI actually looks like. So you can see that, here I'm swapping 100 honey. I'm getting 4.8 IBGT here. And, you can see on the right-hand side where, which DEXes are going to be used, which apps are going to be used, and what is the kind of order flow. So here you can see that this trade of honey into IBGT is going to go through Bex, Burps, V2 and V3 of Kodiak and Honeypot. Somehow Dirac is involved as well, which is very, very good to see. And so, yeah, you can see you can do trades like this and end up at times even having positive price impact, which I think is lovely to see. So let's go into a little bit more detail. Ooga Booga being the kind of native aggregator for the Berachain ecosystem at the moment. They have a range of different products. The spot swap being obviously the main thing here, and you can see it will also tell you the kind of exchange that you're doing as well. So here there's a wrapping contract, wrapping bera into wrapped bera, and then kind of swapping into Bex. Really cool stuff like that. Anyway, they do have a range of other features, and so we'll talk about some of them as well. Dollar cost averaging, you know what that means, letting users kind of swap into an asset over a period of time. Limit orders, which is essentially executing an order based on a set price that you can kind of set, and then matching it with all of the liquidity available in the Bera ecosystem. Multi-asset swaps, so you could do like multiple token swaps in one atomic transaction, and also things like gasless swaps. So you don't need to hold any Bera tokens. You can actually just kind of swap between the assets that you're using, and one of those assets, probably the one that you're swapping from, will be used as the gas payment. So lots of other features here, and we'll talk about the exact fee model, which is actually free. So essentially, if you use Ooga Booga, it's free. Now, you can get charged a fee, and the only time that you are charged a fee is when the pricing is beat by both Bex, which is a native DEX, and Kodiak, which is arguably one of the leading DEXes on Berachain. And only if it's beat by 0.15%, then a 0.069% fee is charged. And so you're always going to get a better price or equal to than Bex and Kodiak when you're using Ooga Booga. And so I think this really highlights it. You can pause the video and just kind of make sure that you understand you're always going to either have the same fee as Bex or Kodiak, or you're going to have a better routing. That is, the best thing about it. Now, in terms of the other features, here there are fees associated. So we've got dollar cost averaging, limit orders, multi-asset swaps, gasless swaps. There are fees associated with all of them. Ooga Booga can also be plugged into various other apps as well. So if you actually wanted to plug in this into another app, there are some extra fees that, for example, referrals from some of the partner protocols as well. So now you might be asking, look, Waj, there are so many other aggregators on other chains, the likes of 1inch or CowSwap or Paraswap or whatever. What separates Ooga Booga from them? Now, there are a few points, and I actually took Kevin, the founder's tweets, to kind of give you a little idea on this. He actually summarized it. Went into a lot more detail. I've tried to summarize it to make it a little bit quicker and easier to just appreciate. And so there's 5 points here. We'll go through all 5 of them one by one. So first of all, there's the deep integrations with novel DEXes. So normally when you look at some of these aggregators, they will just kind of use your typical AMM DEXes. However, there are a bunch of other unique DEXes, especially those on Berachain, that have things like bonding curves, which are a little bit more difficult to integrate. And so you have integrations with your typical AMMs. You also have integrations with DEXes that use things like bonding curves, order books as well. So I think like those kind of deep integrations are one of the things that help it to stand out. Secondly, and I think this is actually probably the coolest thing in my opinion, is the third order integrations. And Kevin explained this really, really well. First order integrations are things like DEXes. So, you can use all the different DEXes on Berachain through one interface on Ooga Booga. Second order are using things like derivatives and their kind of respected contracts. A derivative example is something like, STETH from Lido. Perhaps there may be an order that you could do where if you were to unstake that STETH into vanilla ETH and then do the swap, or vice versa, you had some ETH, you'd stake it into STETH and then do the swap because, for example, an STETH LP pool was more capital efficient, you could use that pool and that order routing instead. And by using those contracts, in addition to DEXes, you've got a second order kind of integration there, and that can make, some better trades for you or some better swap action. Now, third order is taking this one step further and using receipt tokens. And receipt tokens are these tokens that you often get when using DeFi protocols, for example, using, providing liquidity to a DEX or using a lending market of some sort. And those receipt tokens, can also be used because ultimately they are ERC20s at the end of the day. And using liquidity for those receipt tokens on chain is like a third order integration. And for me, this is a really, really cool thing because now it means you can use money markets or kind of DEX LP tokens, which can be used on money markets themselves or perhaps even some complex derivatives, and using them to ensure that you get even better order flow or order routing. I think this is like a really, really cool thing, and one of the things that really separates Ooga Booga from other aggregators for sure. You also have the native element, and I think there is definitely some component here that will help to ensure that transaction volume here is going to be better than other places. Being native to Berachain, the community cult effect that brings. I think if you were to have, a vanilla aggregator and then something like Ooga Booga, perhaps everything could be the same, but just purely from the social aspects that, being native to Berachain and all of the integrations that they've been able to build, I think it could actually sway a lot of people to use a native, protocol rather than the one that's on 10 other chains already. The fee model, as well as we talked about above, there's no fees associated unless it's able to beat Kodiak and Bex by 0.15%, in which case a small fee is still applied, and you'll still kind of get a better price. And then the tokenomics as well. I think that we'll talk about the token here, but it does have an X token model. This is somewhat similar to Grail from Camelot, with a revenue mechanism. No worthless, governance token shenanigans here, like we see with many other kind of DEXes and DEX aggregators as well. So yeah, at the moment, on testnet right now, you can actually play around with the app right now. Who knows if there's going to be any benefits to that whatsoever, but I think, using Berachain testnet right now is always going to be a good thing. You're not only going to learn, but potentially there could be some additional rewards when it comes to mainnet. So yeah, I think it's great to give it a go and try it out. You can see that a ton of unique users and tons of kind of apps integrated already. Great thing is that this is also integrated in other apps as well. So whether it's general DeFi products or whether it's, things like your infrareds or your Codex or your gummies or whatever, derivatives as well. Obviously, derivatives on Berachain are going to be a massive thing. There's so many protocols building in that space. And things like, Telegram bots, Zap features, within apps. I think Dolomite is, very, very popular for that. In-house wallet swaps, derivative swaps. Lots of different places external to the front end that will hopefully generate volume. So I think that's like a really, really good thing that these guys have been cooking really well with. Now, talking about the token as well, 100 million total supply. You can actually stake it for OOGA. And there is like an unstaking cooldown and a fee attached on mainnet. Right now on testnet, you can see that it's 3 days to 7 days. This will be different on mainnet. And the idea is, look, this is the revenue mechanism. The 80% of the fees from the protocol randomly and periodically swapped into OOGA, and then this is kind of distributed back to the stakers. So yeah, there is this buyback model, buyback and earn model. And I think the other thing is there will be some sort of monetary premium here, and that's because not all of the OOGA will be staked. There will be perhaps maybe, let's say hypothetically, only 50% of the token stake. And that means, out of the 100 million total supply, only half of that will be actually earning the revenue from the protocol, which I think is, a nice element. Look, add some game theory because, there will be some tokens that are in LP pools or maybe some tokens in lending markets or things like that. Really, really nice. I like monetary premium things or like game theory stuff like that. I think it's quite cool. And it's also nice to see transparency with revenue models, in DeFi. I think it's great to see. And ultimately what this means is the more volume, the more potential upside here. I think it's pretty clear. And of course, as we mentioned, fees come from some of the other products like DCA, limit orders, multi-asset swaps, gasless swaps, some of the different partner protocols as well. And so, yeah, I think this is really, really cool. Being able to kind of compound your positions as well with real revenue. You can pause the video here if you want to kind of look into the exact kind of caps in terms of where the total supply is going, so to whether it's core contributors for sex listings or whatever. You can pause the video there and have a quick look there. Looks like in general, We're looking at 6 month to 12-month cliffs as well, with 24-month vests afterwards as well. 12% for the community, to be determined. I wonder what that means. We'll have to wait and find out. The team behind Ooga Booga is a small team, but very, very active. Kevin, who I know pretty well, puts out some really, really good content, really high quality educational pieces that really make you think at times. They have some great advisors as well from top protocols, Yeet, Infrared, Kodiak. They did actually raise $1 million in the first round. So yeah, very, very good. Some good angels there as well, which is good to see. Unfortunately, I'm not in it, but it is what it is. The question that I'm really thinking about now is, we've seen aggregators, a lot of aggregators actually. Some of them have done really, really well. Some of them haven't done well. One of them that has done really well is Jupiter, of course. And Jupiter hasn't just done really well. It's actually done phenomenally well. Like really, really, really good. And one of the things that I'm thinking is, okay, yeah, you can have a great spot product, but like long term, like how can you scale this? How can you scale it and add like different aspects of revenue? And like one of the things that I've seen on Jupiter, which is on Solana, is that like they don't just do spots. They started adding so many other products as well, whether it's perps, whether it was research, bridges, a launch pad, kind of ape, any tokens, audits as well. Like so many different kind of elements that they've added, and all of these different things in future can end up being like real strong revenue generators. For example, Jupiter with pubs, they now make a ridiculous amount because the volume there is absolutely incredible. And so, yeah, I do think like future product development needs to be like Jupiter, and I think that is probably the direction that they're going to go in as well. A lot of it is all down to like distribution and marketing. Like can they really capture attention and narrative when Berachain goes live? And if so, could it potentially be like the Jupiter on Solana? Maybe, but I think the narrative really needs to be Ooga Booga is the main place to exchange value on Berachain. Make that the narrative, and I don't see why that's not possible. So yeah. And I think the great thing is, look, you create the free product fast, you scale it, you get the users, you get the distribution, and then you add in kind of all of these other paid products. And this looks like the exact direction that they're going in right now. Clearly on testnet, they've got quite a lot of demand. Whether that kind of translates on mainnet is another question, but I think, at the moment, there doesn't seem to be much competition in the aggregator space. And so I hope that they can just kind of take this narrative and kind of run with it as well. But we'll have to wait and see. Executing this is, of course, not easy, especially because these products are kind of all so different to one another. But that doesn't mean that it can't work. And, Jupiter here is a real example of how you can actually make this work. Last but not least, we'll go into the bull case and the bear case before we head over into my investment thesis. So bull case first. Product-wise, look, this is the main native aggregator. I like to think that Ooga Booga gets like the most trading volume. I don't see any other aggregator. Please correct me if I'm wrong. That's really kind of making noise on Berachain, and I think, yeah, these guys are doing really, really well. Fees should come naturally, especially when there's like unusual or uncommon pairs. And I think one of the great things is, we are going to see so many tokens launch on Berachain. There are so many ecosystem apps. Ultimately, that means we're going to have lots of long tail assets. These long tail assets often don't have the best liquidity or fragmented liquidity, and therefore aggregators really come in handy there. And I think in those cases, we're going to see, perhaps some of the fees coming from those specific assets. So we'll have to wait and see. Of course, there will be kind of those other features as well. As far as I'm aware as well, no other DEX will have stuff like limit orders or gasless swaps or atomic transactions to begin with. Maybe it will take a while for this to happen, but the idea is that there will be fees from other sources too. There's lots of integrations already. The chain's not even live. With kind of other Bera ecosystem apps as well. And lastly, as I mentioned, I think that they will go down a route like Jupiter, create various sub-products that can complement or even be additions to the main aggregator product. Perhaps they might not even complement whatsoever, but they can be real revenue generators, like what Jupiter has done. I think token-wise as well, it's very clear to see where the value lies. It's revenue generator, more volume, more fees, There's a direct relationship there. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, there will be some sort of monetary premium, which I think is an additional benefit, especially if you are looking at it from an investment perspective. But of course, no financial advice. Bear case, I think one thing that I'd like to see is a little bit more on the non-tech side, especially on the marketing side. I don't think that Ooga Booga has the same mind share as major DEXes like Kodiak at the moment, whereas on Solana, that's the complete opposite. Jupiter has so much more mind share than any of the DEXes that it routes through, like Radium, for example. And so I think Jupiter did this really, really well on Solana. I don't think Ooga Booga are doing it as well just yet, but of course that can always change. Secondly, I think a lot of work needs to be done for users to shift over from Bex and Kodiak and like some of the other top DEXes. I think right now, just because of the efforts that these guys have done on testnet, naturally you get users who end up kind of just clinging onto that DEX. We saw this with Uniswap as well. People still use a Uniswap front end when we have aggregators that can save you fees, but people still use them. And I think a lot of that comes from the non-tech elements, the marketing, the affiliations, and the emotions that users have when using exchanges. So yeah, I think while intuitively it always makes sense to use Ooga Booga, in reality, branding, the Lindley effects, and affinity makes users stick to where they often feel comfortable. And as I mentioned, look, this is why Uniswap, and even MetaMask as well, they continue to rake it in, even though it's so easy to avoid that like 0.875 or 0.75% fee that MetaMask has. It's absurd why people even use MetaMask swap, yet they continue to do so today. And MetaMask is obviously making millions every year from it. One question I'm thinking about now is like, what happens if another aggregator pops up, kind of adds some sort of token incentive, and will it be some sort of vampire attack similar to kind of, remember that back in the day, Sushi Swap, vampire attacking Uniswap? Well, we know how that ended up. It didn't end up too well in Sushi's favor. So yeah, but I don't think that Ooga Booga right now have enough of a moat to protect themselves against something like this just yet. Of course, with time, the Lindley effects, the branding, the affinity, all of that stuff does come. But yeah, that is just something that I am thinking about right now. Like right now, in this current moment, I don't think that there is enough of a moat just yet. Perhaps with some of the future products that they bring, it's a different story altogether. Is the team big enough right now? I guess possibly through fundraising, they can grow their team out a little bit more and then kind of scale things, a little bit more. And lastly, just on a token perspective, are DEX or even aggregated tokens even favorable anymore in these markets? At times, they can be really, really great trades. But not many, especially, my friends and my network as well, hold DEX tokens, as kind of long-term cycle plays. There are a few exceptions. As I mentioned, Jupiter is one of them. Uni is another, especially right now more than ever. But I think in general, this is a place where most tokens aren't always the best ones to go for. But we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail now when we look at the investment thesis here. And of course, everything here is, not financial advice. These are just some of my own thoughts. So please take it with a pinch of salt. So when it comes to investing in aggregators, right, or even DEXs at times, one of the things that I always think about is the fact that it's all about distribution and it's all about volume. Higher volume equals bigger, larger likelihood to generate lots of fees and therefore more value to token stakers. You have to remember though that volume is always dynamic. You can have volume one week, but the next week something could happen to your protocol and the volume disappears. And we've seen this time and time again. We see this with lots of derivative protocols as well, where volume comes but it doesn't stay. Distribution, however, and some of the other kind of non-tech elements, things like Jupiter and Uniswap have done really, really well, can really help with this. How much, one of the questions I'm thinking about with Ooga Booga is like, how much of the product will get used, especially some of the products that make fees. If DCA, limit orders, multi-asset swaps, gasless swaps, etc. get a large amount of use and the volume is pretty good, then I think there's obviously big revenue potential here for Ooga Booga. Right now, if you have a look at kind of all of the aggregators that we see today, Jupiter is absolutely dominating everyone by a mile, like 5 times more in kind of daily volume at times, sometimes even more. That's compared to like second, which is typically been like 1inch or ODOS or CowSwap. Like these three are kind of competing in the second, third, fourth place. Even if you go down as far as KyberSwap, like these still have pretty decent volume and therefore still able to generate some pretty decent fees associated with it. Often those fees don't go to token holders though. That is a different thing altogether. So high volume does not always equal good token. You can see Paraswap, like generally doing pretty well, sixth place, did 400 million in volume over the last 7 days. But I mean, look at this chart. It's trading at 20 million FTV. This really doesn't look good, like a token that's performing very well, right? So high volume doesn't always equal good token. That is just something to mention there. Now, if we look at some of the other competitors that exist today, and I am pretty sure that some of them will end up coming to Berachain, maybe 1inch, maybe ODOS, maybe Paraswap, OKX aggregator for sure, KyberSwap, they always like to kind of go on to new chains as well. So some of these definitely will be on Berachain. If we look at 1inch, for example, last 3 months, 2.5 million wallets, over 1 billion in weekly volume, 50 billion in volume annualized. But there's like a poor revenue accrual, really a significant lack of fees. You've got all of these users, all of this volume going through. But like if you actually look at the financial statements here, and I probably should zoom into this a little bit more, but ultimately we're looking at hardly any earnings whatsoever. I'll try and leave a link to this in the description below, but it comes from Token Terminal. Yet somehow 1inch today still trades at like a 400 million FTV, and at one point in time was trading in the multiple billions. This is like, to me, really interesting because like, yeah, the fee and the kind of valuation also doesn't have to match. There's so many other elements that kind of come into play when figuring out like, how these tokens can be valued. These are a couple of examples of better tokens in the aggregator space. As I mentioned, Jupiter, which is at 1 bill market cap, but 7.5 bill valuation right now, which is absurd, but that's what it's trading at. And also Cow as well, which has recently had a lot of attention, possibly because of introduction of solvers and kind of moving into the intent space as well. Kind of trading at 270, almost 300 million FTV there. So these are better examples, but yeah, just wanted to kind of highlight a few of the competitors that exist in the space, what their valuations are, and just kind of go through the token appreciation element. So yeah, look, distribution and narrative is everything. Can Ooga Booga capture this? Look, it has a few interesting effects. It has the new ecosystem effect, Berachain as well being arguably one of the most hyped L1s that has ever come in existence. It's the only native aggregator. It is integrated really well within the ecosystem already. They have products outside of the main swap as well. And I think like Jupiter, I think they will have these other sub-products as well. And so I've written here, I think if Ooga Booga were to get $100 million in daily volume and capture 5% of this volume via fee-sharing products, I think that's approximately $5,000 in daily revenue, just under $2 million annualized. I think it's fair to think that Ooga could be worth 100 million FTV in this state. But yeah, those are my thoughts. Let's see if Ooga Booga is able to even get that much volume. We'll have to wait and see, of course. Berachain mainnet hopefully isn't that long away. So yeah, I'm very intrigued to hear what your thoughts are. What do you think about kind of DEX aggregators? What do you think about Ooga Booga? Do you think it's something that can kind of perform really well? I'd like to know what your thoughts are. Let me know if you think positive, negative. I'm always down to hear. It's always good to have a conversation with some of you guys as well. And of course, let me know what you think about Berachain too. But yeah, I'm keen to do a lot more of these deep dives into Berachain ecosystem protocols. So if there is one that you want me to cover next, let me know in the comment section. I'll do my best to get it out for you. But yeah, otherwise, smash the like button, subscribe to the channel. This was a deep dive on Ooga Booga. Hopefully we'll do many more in the not so distant future. So take care and bye-bye.